yesterday's news.
Hello, welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at news of the day through the papers of yesterday. I saw the Ramsey Swing Bridge was back in the news quite recently. Repairs, I believe, to the veritable old dame of the harbour. And she does go back quite a bit. And indeed, features in the papers over the century or more quite a bit as well, for various reasons. I refer you to the Ramsey Courier, Saturday, September the 27th, 1890, the Ramsey Swing Bridge bungle. This sounds vaguely familiar already, doesn't it? Extracts from the specifications. During the past week, we have taken the trouble to look over the specifications which were prepared by Mr. Lilly, the engineer for the Ramsey Swing Bridge, and we have taken a few extracts which we produce for the benefit of our readers, it starts. The specifications are dated July 1888, and it appears from the preamble that the contractors engaged to complete the works on or before the 28th of February 1889, to maintain the works in proper condition for 12 months after that date, and make good any defects in the works, etc. The contract includes the extension of the wall at the East Quay at Ramsey, the making of a bridge, the construction of covered dams, the building of a centre pier, the masonry in the bed of the harbour for the swing bridge, sinking of cast iron cylinders and screw piles to carry the superstructure of the bridge, the construction and erection of the girders, cross girders, timber decking, formation of all roads and footways, the provision of carrying by hydraulic pivot and water pressure engine for turning the swing bridge, the connection with the town water main, and the hydraulic main to the line of the same across the bed of the harbour and connecting it with machinery in the centre pier. The contract also includes all other necessary works for the construction, erection and completion of the bridge in a sound and substantial manner, with the swing bridge in perfect working order to the entire satisfaction of the engineer and the town commissioners. It goes on in such a way for quite some way. Further down it says the following is a most important clause. If the contractor stop or suspend the works without the order of the engineer, or if he shall not proceed with due speed and diligence in the execution of the works, or shall carry them out in a negligent manner, or with defective material or workmanship, or if the contractor shall at any time during the work become bankrupt, then the engineer shall have full power and authority, after giving 3 days' notice in writing to the contractor of his sureties, or leaving such notice at his or their reputed residences or place of business, to take the whole or any part of the contract out of the contractor's hands, and to employ any other contractor or contractors, persons or workmen to perform the whole or any part of the contract and carry out the complete work, etc., etc. It's all very legalese jargon. It also says the engineer shall have full power to suspend the execution of the works or any part thereof at and for any time, and the engineer may allow the time of such complete but not partial suspension of the works to be added to the time specified for the completion of the contract. The contractor shall keep a sufficient number of workmen employed upon the works, and shall supply and have in reserve sufficient materials and appliances of every kind from the commencement of the completion of the work, to ensure their being carried out in a continuous and rapid manner without interruption or delay, until he shall complete the whole of the works to the satisfaction of the engineer, and shall deliver them over to the commissioners in a sound and perfect condition, and the machinery in thorough working order on or before the 28th of February 1889. The penalty for not carrying this out is £5 per day. Well now, if we now turn to the Times of Saturday, October the 11th, 1890, bearing in mind the last date we've just heard. The Ramsey Swing Bridge, resignation of the engineer. Special telegram, Ramsey, Friday night. Information was received in Ramsey tonight that Mr. Lilly, the engineer for the Ramsey Swing Bridge, has resigned his post. A deputation waited upon him in London, and he has agreed to resign on receiving a certain sum of money. He will give up all plans and decide all questions between the contractor and the Ramsey Town Commissioners up to date. The Commissioners will engage another engineer, who it is hoped will see that the bridge is speedily completed. Bearing in mind, it was already the back end of 1890, and it was supposed to be finished in 1889. I leave it to you, dear listener, whether this rings any vague bells with large capital infrastructure works on the Isle of Man. By 1891, the Times, Saturday, June the 6th, Ramsey Swing Bridge. Considerable progress has been made in the construction of the bridge since the aid of Mr. J. Walker, C.E., as consulting engineer. This is now 1891, I should say. It's been obtained, and consequently all ground for the grave doubts which existed as to its ever being completed have disappeared. Some things never change, do they? The foundations of the central pier, as to which so much difficulty had been experienced, have been satisfactorily completed, and the upper portion of the central pillar, which is composed of concrete with a facing of limestone ashlar, is now raised some feet above the bed of the harbour and is steadily approaching completion. Both the iron cylinders on the mooric side of the swing bridge have been sunk by pneumatic pressure to their full depth. One of them has for some weeks past been filled with concrete, and the work of filling the other will be finished today, namely Saturday. I like they were working on Saturday, albeit they were 2 years late, so that as soon as the 2 cylinders next the quay are sunk and filled with concrete, the whole of the foundation work of the structure will be completed, and all that will remain to be done will be to erect the ironwork and the swinging portion of the bridge. And then it might be completed, a mere 2 years or so after it was meant to be. We'll skip forward a few decades to the time, Saturday, October the 7th, 1944. Ramsey Swing Bridge formal taking over by the Harbour Commissioners. Presentations to Mr. R.C. Kane and Mr. W.H. Alcock. The occasion of the taking over of the Ramsey Swing Bridge from the Ramsey Commissioners by the Alaman Harbour Commissioners was marked by a luncheon provided by the Ramsey Board when the Harbour Commissioners were guests of honour. Following the meal, 2 interesting presentations were made. Mr. W.H. Alcock, MHK, CTC, JP, who presided, recalled that it was 15 years ago, almost to the day, that he first asked for the sufferance of Ramsey to go to the historic House of Keys, and on his election platform he had only 4 planks: to get the swing bridge taken off the town, pensions for spinsters at a much earlier age than 70, a hydroelectric plant at Sulby Bridge, so that electricity could be supplied for practically nothing. Has that happened yet? This was only 1944, and to try to get a Manx postage stamp for the island. With the advent of Mr. R.C. Kane as Receiver General, they had a man who was not only very fond of Ramsey and very helpful in every way, but he saw it was not a right thing for that bridge and all its expenses to be carried by Ramsey. Mr. Kane's greatest difficulty was in persuading his colleagues on the Legislative Council how he felt, and while he, Mr. Alcock, was doing the talking, the Receiver General was doing the engineering work, and he wanted to personally thank him. He asked Mr. Kane to accept a silver cigarette box as a small token of his appreciation. Applause. Whether that was for the fact he was going to hitch up a fag or not, I don't know. The Receiver General, in accepting the gift, humorously remarked that the innocents had come to Ramsey that day. With regard to the swing bridge, he did not know how the Ramsey Commissioners ever got permission to put the bridge across the harbour, belonging to the Harbour Commissioners. They never should have borne that burden. He supposed that the idea was the development of the Mooric. He was now 2 years off 80, but if he lived to be 180, he would never forget Mr. Alcock. He had done very well for Ramsey, and it also to pay tribute to the people of Ramsey for the wise selection they'd made of representatives as far back as his memory went. He thanked them on behalf of the Harbour Board, and their officials, Mr. Brown and Mr. Matthews, would be happy to take the bridge over and relieve them of that burden which they should never have borne. He believed Mr. Brown had an idea in his mind. The bridge would not always be turned by hand, but something more modern. Applause. I think they got the electricity there in the end. Mr. T.H. Corkle, JP, said they looked on that as a red-letter day in the history of Ramsey, a day when they were transferring the swing bridge. He confessed he had been among those who had regarded Mr. Alcock's idea as a hopeless dream. He had never thought that in so short a time the bridge would be taken from them, and he and his colleagues had felt it would be a fitting thing to acknowledge the debt of gratitude they all felt for the zeal with which he had tackled the question of the bridge. As a little reminder of this very interesting and to Ramsey profitable occasion, he asked Mr. Alcock to accept a book, This Is My Case, by Gervais Rontou, the Metropolitan Magistrate, with a voucher to purchase other books or articles. Mr. Alcock, in accepting the gift, said it was one of those occasions that really left him speechless. He had been longing to lay his hands on that book, it does sound like a winner, and he would read it with the greatest possible pleasure. And whenever he opened it and saw the kindly feelings expressed in the front page, he would cherish it as long as he lived, and hoped that it would also cement the affection his children and grandchildren felt for Ramsey. And after the luncheon, the party walked to the swing bridge, and after an informal inspection, Mr. J.H. Cleater recited a humorous poem he had written for the occasion. Sadly, It was not transcribed, so I can't bring it to you, but I bet it was a belter. The Ramsey Swing Bridge is open again, we read in the Ramsey Courier of Friday, December the 6th, 1946. So a headline rather like the recent one in Manx Radio. Ramsey Swing Bridge is open again after being closed for some weeks while the work is being carried out of installing, yes, you're right, electric motors. So only 2 years from that last article to when the electric motors went in and it was no longer swung by hand. And as the article notes, the bridge can now be swung by electric power instead of by hand. The members of the Isle of Man Harbour Board last week inspected the work that had been done during their visit to Ramsey. By 1959, in the Times of Friday, April the 24th, we read that there's one-way traffic on Ramsey Swing Bridge and Douglas Bridge closed to vehicles. From next Friday, only one-way vehicular traffic will be allowed on Ramsey Swing Bridge going towards the Moorick Promenade from the West Quay. And from the same date, the Douglas Swing Bridge over the harbour will be closed to all vehicular traffic. In each case, the order made by the Harbour Board does not apply to perambulators, handcarts, unmounted cycles or invalid carriages. And in 1960, there's a headline in the Isle of Man Times of Friday, June the 17th, new restrictions on Ramsey Swing Bridge. Vehicles over 30 hundredweight will be banned. The notices are ready. New restrictions for motorists on the Ramsey Swing Bridge are planned by the Harbour Board, the chairman, Mr Spencer Kelly, MHK, revealed last night. The bridge is now 68 years old and the strain of modern traffic is beginning to tell, said Mr Kelly. After an inspection recently by the bridge engineer from the builders, it has been suggested by them that the permissible weight on it should be reduced from 2 tonnes to 30 hundredweight. The Harbour Board have notices ready to put up, but they have not done so yet out of consideration to motorists. Mr Kelly delivered this warning at the monthly public meeting of the Ramsey Commissioners on Wednesday after the reading of a minute of the Works Committee, which recommended that the Commissioners should write to the Harbour Board protesting at the continued policy of permitting only one-way traffic on the bridge. Explained Mr Kelly, every bridge wears out. This one was built in 1892. It's now coming to the end of its lifetime. After being told this, the Commissioners decided not to bother writing to the Harbour Board. Mrs N.M. Cool said she thought one-way traffic was ideal for the bridge, although she thought that probably traffic lights at either end could be an alternative way out, with traffic being allowed on the bridge from either end at certain intervals. Mrs D.M. Quayle commented, "Personally, I think the one-way traffic system was one of the finest things that happened. It's out of consideration for pedestrians because pedestrians got very little consideration from motorists. The 5-mile-an-hour limit was ignored." She said it was bad enough with one-way traffic on the bridge without reverting back to the old system. Even now, it was sheer suicide to push perambulators along the bridge. Mrs Quayle thought the members of the Works Committee should all try to go across the bridge in the height of the season, pushing a pram, and see how they like it, she remarked. It was a wonder there had not been any accidents before now. Mr J.K. Billington said he was inclined to agree with Mrs Quayle. The introduction of one-way traffic on the bridge was a wise thing. He said it worked well in practice. When it came into being, he added, I was very doubtful whether it would be a good thing, but I think experience has shown it is. The one-way system was very good for the pedestrian and, really, Mr Chairman, he exclaimed, I don't think motorists are very inconvenienced. It only takes a moment for the driver to go the other way. There we are, the Ramsey Swing Bridge. Interesting to note, isn't it? In 1960, it was being remarked that it was coming towards the end of its useful life. And here we are in 2024, and whilst I know repairs have been carried out, I think a lot of it is still pretty much the same, is it not? It's featured fairly well, has it not? It's also featured fairly well in the news over the years. The Ramsey Swing Bridge. News now, news then. It has, of course, been old news. Till next week, cheerio.
You're gonna be yesterday's news.